listening to Living with ADHD and CPTSD, available on Apple and wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Living with ADHD and CPTSD. Today's episode is a CPTSD episode, and I don't really have a specific topic on anything necessarily. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some of the things that are going on in my life and understanding and just realizing how complex and how, the word I want to use is intriguing and difficult. This CPTSD has been lately. And the reason that I say that is because there's been some new developments that have come up in my life that I have learned. And along with the changes to how I'm dealing with it and some of the new information, both related to my past and family-related past, and then my own self when it comes to some of the new, new revelations that are occurring in my life today, and actually for the past few weeks. So I'm going to go through that, and you'll have to bear with me because it's not what I would call very structured. It's kind of do it as I go sort of setup here. So please bear with me, and I hope that this is informative, and this is going to give you, in my mind, is going to give you a broader understanding of just where I'm coming from when it comes to my CPTSD. So I'm going to go from the beginning, what I've learned, kind of run up from the history up to present time, and then discuss some of the things that have been new to me personally that have made some changes in how I'm dealing with my trauma and other areas of life as well, related to like ADHD and anxiety and stuff. Okay, so a few weeks ago, I gained some really insightful information that I have been, I guess you could say, dying to learn. And it's regarding issues and past generational trauma within my family that really helps to further confirm and give me a better, more concrete understanding of why I am the way I am. And hopefully throughout this you'll be able to see that I am just like a lot of my listeners, or a good proportion of my listeners, who have complex trauma. Because it's important that you understand and that you see that despite not necessarily having it as worse as some of you out there, I realize that we all kind of have our own past where we faced our own trauma and our own demons. Not everybody is the same, and not everybody treats their trauma and their mental health the same. Okay. Some of you may be aware, I am currently 44 years of age, living in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And my family is from Saskatchewan, and my immediate family moved to Alberta in 1974 and settled down, and did their thing for 4 years and then decided to have a child, and I was born. And then about 3.5 years later, my brother was born, and that was it for children. And I grew up in a family where my parents both kind of grew up in two different, very different families. Both of them had large families. One had 9 and another had 8 children. And they are pretty close to the same time frame as to when the first child came into the world, and when the last one did. Very similar. There's some time difference, but anyway, on my dad's side, there were 5 brothers and 4 sisters, and they grew up where, and I didn't even know this until recently, that they grew up in what you could say in an abusive family. And to some degree, it reflects back to me, because I had no idea. There was never any information that had been given to me regarding this. And I do know that usually it's passed down generation to generation. It's not something that often that comes out of nowhere, just gets created randomly. Unless, of course, that person who is the one dishing out the abuse has gone through some very unusual or very traumatic events that are not family related, but more personal. Maybe there was a tragedy. Maybe they experienced something like a war, or like a very serious, like a tornado hit or an earthquake or something. So they've experienced trauma from this event, and it affects them as they go through their life. So they settle down and they meet somebody, and they have a couple kids or so, and then they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to deal with the trauma, and they're having flashbacks and triggers to this past situation or this event that was very traumatic and very terrifying. And this is true for many generations of men, and even today for a lot of it. Men were not really allowed to, and are under this belief that it is not right to show yourself as being weak or in trouble or having problems. Mental illness is not something that they talk about. And so something of that nature is either shunned down or shunned upon, or they stay quiet about it. If it ever comes up, they try to downplay it and avoid it and move on to another subject, and they never really discuss it. And so you end up not getting any help with it, and instead of healing and moving forward and avoiding your children or even your spouse from experiencing your triggers and you becoming violent or taking it out on them because you don't have any other way of dealing with it, it gets passed down to them. And unless those children are, unless they deal with it from an early age and they realize that they've got this hidden trauma or flashbacks from being abused in their past, there's a good chance that it might come and affect them as well. And so it kind of gets passed down generation to generation, unless the cycle stops because the person who's receiving it decides to see a therapist and decides to get assistance and help and learn what happened and learn from it and heal themselves and get better, instead of allowing it to take over and take control over them or their minds and their body. And just, it's a never-ending cycle. So I grew up where, of course, I had a father who had a very short temper and would go from 0 to 100 in like a second. It's basically right immediately. Something would upset him and it would be to the point, like it would be like immediate. He would just shoot off the end and nobody could talk him down. He wouldn't, and the only person who would be able to calm down would be himself. And the thing that would come out of it is if I got into trouble, whether it was something that I did being a kid or, having accidentally breaking something or just, acting like a child and doing childish related behaviors as a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, when that would occur, my father would get extremely upset and he would blow off, his temper would go and I would be on the brunt end of it. I'd get hit on the butt, like, spanked repeatedly and very aggressively. And it occurred so often that I built this like very vigilant or hyper-vigilant form of behavior, and it kept growing even when I got older and I got to the point where the physical discipline couldn't occur anymore. It then turned into more verbal threats and like control. Like I knew that I was under control. Like I didn't have the ability and I didn't feel that I could resist or that I could talk back or, get in the way. There was no way for me to do that because I knew that he had control over me in that way. And I remember learning that my parents often would fight. They would squabble and say mean things to each other. And being a child, being in the middle of it, it obviously affects you too because you think you're doing something wrong. The child thinks it's his fault instead of it actually being either both parents or one of the parents' fault for the behavior. So then, of course, the kid wants to change his behavior and act abnormal towards his parent or parents in order to try and fix things, which of course is pointless because it's not going to get you anywhere. You're not going to make any changes. And the sooner that you realize that it's not your fault, you aren't the reason for them fighting, the better you will be. But the longer the damage and the reinforcement from this is on you, the longer and the more difficult it's going to be to heal and to get better from that stage. Now, I'm not the first generation of kids from this family to face this. My father and his siblings, did. My grandfather also did, and he unfortunately would put it onto his children, which, like I said, was going down in a cycle. And so it would circle back. So it would start with him, but the thing is it likely, I don't know the history beyond him, but in the last 115 years since he's been alive, there's been that cycle. And there's many different stories that I've heard about this where it really made sense to me. Like it was starting to kind of come together. My understanding of what happened to me was clear, and it really helped myself become more aware of everything as to why it happened, how it developed, and the things that I've seen and done, and the behaviors that I have presented are definitely CPTSD related, behaviors. I have often been triggered and blended with my system. My child parts have been playing a big role in my life for probably now 9 years. I know that they've been around longer than that, but I was never really aware of it consciously until 2013. That's when all these other health related things started to come up, and that's when I was suddenly aware of the anxiety, and I was aware of, like, I didn't understand it, which is why I didn't know I was triggered. I didn't know that I had CPTSD back in 2013. I just knew that something had changed. Like for the most part, I was a pretty calm, well-adjusted, happy man. I was, I'm just trying to think how old I was. I was 33, or no, 35. There we go. Sorry. I was 35 years old when it started to happen. And previous to then, I'd gone through my share of rejections. I had been through a couple of relationships at that point, and I didn't realize then, but a lot of the things that I would do when I was in those relationships were trigger-related, part-related actions, not adult-type behaviors. And in a way, I wish I had known about that then instead of only in the last few years, because I could have made a lot more progress, but that's neither here nor there, because you can't do anything about it now, unfortunately. But yeah, like I went through a lot of rejection, and there was a lot of times where I was scared. I didn't want any confrontation. I hated and feared any sort of negativity, especially when it came to the opposite sex. Like I tried for many years online dating, because that was the only way I could do it. I had no ability and I had no courage to, in person, go up to any woman that I found interesting and ask them out. And it was such a large, like, I felt like I wasn't worthy of affection and love from anyone. I thought that, it was always my fault. Like I didn't think I was an attractive man. I didn't think that I had what it took to really do much. I guess you could say I thought I was kind of like a loser, or like I was a subhuman or subpar man when it compared to others. And I guess it didn't really help that I had I guess you could say, lived a pretty sheltered life in my time, because when there were things that were occurring, like, like I didn't exactly have friends when I was like in school. I didn't really have friends. I had a couple friends that were outside of school that we used to hang out together until we were about 17 or 18. And then that really just kind of ended suddenly. And then when I finished school, I had my stages of things that I did. I went to a college, took a year's course, and I didn't meet anybody there. I didn't make any friends. And then I did work, and I didn't make any friends in any of my jobs. And I think of all the people that I knew, there was only 2 or 3 people that I had any sort of contact with on any sort of regular basis. And one of them was a person that I was dating. And then the other 2 were also women, but they were just friends. And I never really did have a shot. It was just friendship. I never really wanted to go beyond that. And so going through this repetitive cycle that I had, like constant rejection, not feeling confident about myself, low self-esteem, like extremely insecure. I often made a lot of mistakes and would say dumb things, or like my mental ability was not as confident, not as intelligent and mature as some people, at that point. And so I often said to myself, and I think to a few people, that I just wish that they'd give me a shot. I always thought that it wasn't my fault. Like, why do women treat me poorly? Why am I always being turned away? Like, what is it that I'm doing? I don't understand. I'm a nice guy. I'm very open-minded. I'm very friendly, very chatty, happy and stuff. And it just never worked. Like, it was almost like it was pointless. And as I learned eventually, the fact that, and it was confirmed that I have inattentive ADHD, and there's a good chance that I am on the autism spectrum, and the CPTSD, which of course means that I'm going to have trauma-related flashbacks and triggers throughout time, many times, sometimes multiple times daily. And then something that I guess I just kind of ignored for the first while was that I also suffer from anxiety. And I was actually thinking, and I was reading some information yesterday, that I'm starting to believe that I am a high-functioning anxiety kind of person. So, and a lot of the symptoms that they expressed were relevant to me, and I fit them. Because often, and the thing is as it was explained to me, my anxiety comes from my childhood, because I didn't know every morning when I would wake up, and as I grew up, I did, and became older and a little more independent, I didn't know what to expect each morning, because it was kind of like an up and down, right? Like a very fast, uncontrolled roller coaster. You didn't know what to expect each day. And so I was always on edge. I was always like keeping an eye out on things, being hyper aware, and hyper vigilant about what's happening. It's like I was always waiting for the next shoe to drop. And sometimes it would, and then there would be days that nothing would happen. But it was so built into my system and so strong that even after I moved out and into my own place, which was 10 years ago, it never went away, because sure, I'd be on my own, but there were often times that any kind of thing or problem or smallest little, sudden reaction would get me to be feeling super anxious, and then I'd be triggered, and I would be worried, and I would suffer from panic attacks, and I didn't want to be by myself. So there was you couldn't win. No matter which direction I went, I couldn't get relief, because I wanted to have my own place, and I wanted to be by myself and have the privacy and the safety of being alone and fending for myself. But at the same time, I was always, more often than not, I was feeling lonely. And I always dreamed or had this fantasy of having someone with me that could always come over, that, like a girlfriend or something, that would always be there for me, and we'd hang out together and have a life together. Because even though I did go and hang out with my parents and my brother often, it was like I relished going home and having my own time. But I never felt secure. I never felt happy. I was always scared of something. There was always something that would make, like I said, it'd make me get panicked and feeling a high amount of anxiety. And then when my health issues started, a year later, it was just hell. I thought I was dying, and I thought I nothing was working, and I was having all sorts of issues. I couldn't sleep. I was feeling tired, and I was feeling sore. And I remember going to Saskatchewan in 2013, and most of that week, I didn't feel like myself. I felt zoned out. I felt like I was off in some other world. I didn't really enjoy things as much as I could have. I was always thinking about how much pain I was and how difficult things were. And it never fully went away for the longest time. And then it only really started to get better. I think it was a year or two was when you kind of had relief. But there was so much trauma built in, and there was such a development of anxious feelings and anxiety from this, that any slight reoccurrence or any relapse would immediately trigger me and make me think exactly the same thing. Even years down the road, when there was it was pretty obvious to everybody, and especially myself, that I definitely wasn't going to die, that I didn't have any serious illness, that it would trigger me into thinking that I did. I would always think super hard and obsess about it, and never be able, I was always convincing myself that maybe I overlooked something. There are these signs. It just makes sense. And I would be testing my body, and I would intentionally go walking and eventually go swimming, with the whole point of proving to myself that I wasn't sick, that there was nothing wrong with me. And I did stuff I was eating to make myself feel better, so I'd eat junk food, or I'd eat fast food, or I was always snacking on something. I'm just glad I didn't become an alcoholic, because that could have happened. I'm very fortunate that I didn't go that route. But there's a lot of, it was just very built, well-rounded, very complex, very, difficult, webbed, fine weaved form of trauma and anxiety that was built in to me, that getting past it was extremely difficult. And it's so much better today, but it's still, it's not perfect. I am far from being in that position that I feel like I'm healed, or that I can feel like I can move past this and not worry about these things. And like, this gets in the way. Like it was always getting in the way of enjoying life, of being happy, being able to be present in the moment. You know, you go somewhere like on a trip, and the trip would be over so fast, and all you would ever think about is worrying about things, you know, like not being able to enjoy what is in front of you, being able to take it in, being able to be in the moment, you know, like to get as much out of it as you can, because your mind is so stuck and so obsessed about the negativity, the trauma, the anxiety that you're feeling, because any slight thing that would occur that would make you feel funny or make you feel sore, or, you know, like it would trigger me, and it would make me think really bad things about myself, you know, like that I was having a problem, or I was seriously ill, or maybe I was developing something that, you know, was taking my memory away, like I was developing Alzheimer's or dementia, or you know, there'd be all these crazy random thoughts that would fly into my head. And it didn't matter at all, the fact, and it made it worse, that having ADHD really turns that on to super high speed, like it just into turbo drive, because you just can't stop. Like, you know, like people who don't have ADHD, they can find ways to distract themselves and take them out of it and get some relief, or they, you know, like they have ways of doing it. But because of my ADHD, it was making the anxiety way worse. It was making the triggers and the trauma a lot worse. And there would be nights that all I could ever think about while I'm trying to sleep is all this disastrous, like all these disasters, all this catastrophizing, and it was just like never ending, and it would scare the crap out of me. I'd get so stressed out, and I'd feel so much anxiety that it would literally take away the ability to do anything, to enjoy life, to do any sort of fun stuff without feeling that anxious weight on me that would take me down and make life just miserable. Okay, yeah. Present time, it's a little, things have been kind of rough. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I've been on depressant for anxiety for 2 weeks now, and I had some side effects that were causing me to feel more anxious and than I'd normally do. So it was a built up higher level, and I decided to do this because I was noticing that despite the ADHD symptoms feeling like they're no longer occurring, or very minimal at the very least, that I was still having a lot of anxious moments. I would get scared, or I would feel a sudden oncoming feeling where it would just be like hypersensitive and just, you know, like worried about something or being paranoid all the time. And I got to a point where I'm like, okay, there's gotta be a way. I've been told, and my doctor told me, and the psychiatrist that did the interview for my ADHD assessment both also said that getting on to an anti-anxiety medication could be very helpful, because it would calm down the mind. It would allow me to think clearer, to not feel scared, and to be able to relax, and also hope that it would, take away a lot of or all of the impulsive feelings and actions that I have. So the good effects of it have been pretty minimal so far. I haven't really noticed much. The best way I can put it is I kind of feel like blah, but I'm not feeling like super relaxed and super happy necessarily. I just feel, I wouldn't say I necessarily feel calmer. I still got a little while to go. I'm not expecting it to just kick in 2 weeks. They did say that it takes about 4 weeks for it to start really taking its effect, which is fine. It's what I expected. And the journey's been pretty good, so I'm happy about that. But what it's done is, like, this whole journey has really complicated things, because not only now do I have to deal with my ADHD, the autism, all the symptoms that I'm having with that, and then of course my complex trauma, which has always been at the forefront of everything. And now I'm dealing with the anxiety that is sometimes difficult to tell where I'm at. Am I feeling anxiety and I have the adults being here the whole time and just feeling like getting stuck and feeling where you just can't do anything because you're too anxious and you're too scared to go anywhere? Or am I getting triggered? Am I having a child part that's online? Like, it's a little hard to tell sometimes, because they're so similar, like, you don't really know for sure. I think the only person that would really know is a doctor, like a psychiatrist or a psychologist that did a study and observed you for a long time. They would probably have a better idea if I am triggered or if I'm feeling an anxiety attack or a panic attack from the anxious feelings that I get. And I'd like to think that I have a good grasp, and I'm getting control over this. It's just things in my life have been so kind of unpredictable and stressful lately that it has been affecting my ability to maintain and have a happy and productive relationship. And it seems like whenever I leave the house, I kind of have that immediate a notion where I feel better. I feel more relaxed. I feel less stressed and less, like paranoid or worrying about things. And so what's been decided is that the two of us are going to kind of like take a break for a while. We're going to give each other a chance to just have some time to relax and to recover, to do some healing. I'm going to be doing a lot of work. I'm going to do a lot of processing with my system and my parts. I'm going to do a lot of work with my anxiety. I have another appointment with my therapist next week, which is going to be really interesting, because we're going to an equine facility where there's horses and they do therapy with horses. And so I'm going to get to be around them and I'm going to get to experience this. And I love horses, which is actually really great because it's going to be a different environment. And I'm hoping that this will be like a fresh change. A new venue will be able to have a better perspective on things. And I'm really looking forward to it. I do need to really work on things. The one area that I'm really struggling with, and I think I've been struggling with for a very long time, is the ability to recognize when I'm actually triggered. I have such a difficult time noticing what I am and when I'm not, and noticing the difference. There's been a lot of work, there's been a lot of suggestions, a lot of ideas that have been thrown my way, both from therapists and family members and friends, to help, like many different breathing exercises, like counting to 10, taking deep breaths. When you notice that things are getting tense, to pause for 5 minutes, to go away, to think and to process and ground, and then come back out and discuss what's going on. So there's been numerous different suggestions that have been brought up. And then, of course, the polyvagal theory, with the vagal nerve, that was also something that was brought up. And it's hard to say if any of it's really made much progress. I know it's difficult to really take care of it right now because of so much anxiety. Like, I do have such a high level of anxiety that it seems like the second something is wrong or is slightly off kilter or isn't normal, and this could be multiple different areas, it's like I'm just done. Like, I can't notice that it's starting, and that I'm failing to see that I'm in the middle of it. I'm not saying I'm always failing 100% of the time. It's just that the majority of the times when it occurs, I'm not recognizing that this is what's happening. I'm not noticing my state of mind. I'm not noticing the state of being that I have in that moment. And it's making for a very difficult time to make progress and to get forward or to move forward in my healing. And it's, at the same time, it's put a lot of stress and difficulties and complications into my relationship. So, yeah, taking some time away and trying to figure out ways to make it better and get to be easier on myself is definitely a key here. And I am well aware that it's going to be a lot of work. It's definitely not going to be easy. The things that I'm doing to help myself is I'm going out often and doing, like, walking. I like to take my dog and go out on a good walk, at least 30, 40 minutes. I've sometimes even have gone for an hour. I like to just kind of relax outside. I sit in my hammock and just kind of chill, listen to music, try to find something to distract myself. I can't do that all day long because you're not making any progress. You're just avoiding doing the hard work. So at some point I do have to, stop and take care of it. And I am doing that. I do a lot of thinking. My podcasts the ones that I create that you guys are listening to, have been actually really helpful for myself because I learn a lot as I'm recording, and seeing the information that I'm presenting to you guys is being actually extremely helpful and beneficial to myself as well. And in fact, of course, seeing my therapist and talking to my family and my friends about this and getting information and advice from them has definitely been beneficial for me to move forward. But the bottom line is it's really up to me. No matter what we do and where we go, it's always going to be up to me in the long run to get this fixed and to get closer to healing my mind and hopefully getting past this anxiety and past the triggers, because my relationship is highly dependent on me getting better. I have caused so much difficulty and pain, even though I'm not intending to. Like I have zero intention of hurting anybody. It's just that when your parts come online and they take over, especially if you don't have control or you're not able to get back into control after they take over, it's almost kind of worse. It's like having a dual personality, you know? The good guy is the one that's nice and kind and buys chocolates and flowers and does kind things at home and is an amazing person. And then all of a sudden he gets triggered by something and he becomes a jerk and he says mean things and doesn't show affection and has no emotional attachment and can't connect and refuses to say sorry and it seems to always be off on his own little world and gets angry easily and says childish things. So it's kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde routine. And right now, Hyde's working, or is winning. Working, yeah. Hyde is winning right now. And it's scary. Like, I've struggled because it just feels easier to not face it today than to face it. Like, I'm not saying that I have never faced it. I do often sit down and face my trauma and work with my parts to understand what's happening. But unfortunately, it's like over 50% of the time that I'll end up turning the TV on and watching a movie or going out and eating junk food or taking a walk and just listening to music and not thinking about anything other than what you see in front of you. It's making me avoid facing my fears and facing my trauma and healing from it. That's not good for my system because it makes it awful difficult for them to trust me because it's like I'm refusing to take care of them. I'm refusing to do anything about it. I do need to, and I know I've said many times on air and off air that I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to do more. I'm going to get to the bottom of it. But there are times when it's extremely difficult to do it because you just don't feel safe enough or you don't feel secure, and you find that it can get awful difficult very fast, and so you end up quitting before you really make any progress. I know that for those of you that are listening who all obviously suffer from CPTSD, your own personal issues that have come up are all unique. Some of you have dealt with narcissistic parents who are mentally abusive, physically abusive. Maybe you've dealt with bullying through most of your childhood. Maybe you had siblings that were very mean to you and beat you up. Maybe you've been in relationships where you dated a psychopath. Like, we all have our own unique stories that explain to the rest of the world who we are and why we get triggered and why we have these parts and why we find it so extremely difficult to heal and end up having to go see therapists to help us get progress and get closer to healing. A lot of us find it extremely difficult to do it. The fact that we can't all afford to go to therapy doesn't really help, and not everybody has access to that kind of assistance, which is really unfortunate because we all should. But yeah, like, we all have to somehow find ways to overcome our fears, and do what's best for us, do what's best for our mind, do what's best for our future, and do what's best for any relationships that we may be in or wanting to get into. Because without that healthy mind and without that ability to know what's going on and to have self-control, you're going to have a lot of rejections and a lot of negative impacts, which is only going to make things worse. Usually, if you're in a relationship and you've been dealing with trauma and you're having flashbacks and it's causing you to do or say things that are not appropriate, whether it's verbally being abusive or physically being abusive, or maybe you are a narcissist and you don't even realize it. Without healing yourself and without fixing your issues ahead of time, it makes being in a relationship extremely difficult, and you're 9 out of 10 times most likely going to lead to failure. And you're either going to be left many times, or you're going to be too scared and run away. So you have to take control of yourself. It's your responsibility. You have to own up to the fact that you have trauma and that you likely have CPTSD. You have to own that. You have to go out there and say out loud to people you trust. If you're able to tell your family, that's fantastic. But you need to be able to admit to yourself that you have a problem that needs to be taken care of, and that you need to get the right help, and you need to take it seriously so that someday you can be healed and you can feel like you're in control. Because without it, you're just going to end up continuing that fall, going downhill, and you're going to be like that snowball. It's going to get bigger and bigger, and the bigger it gets, the more destructive it's going to become, because the further you get behind and the less that your parts trust you, the worse damage there's potential for out there with people that you care about. So I definitely recommend, if you haven't yet, I definitely recommend finding a therapist. If you're lucky enough, see if you can find one that deals with the structural dissociation theory model. Because that one, it is relatively new. You might have a bit of a difficult time finding a therapist, but if you're lucky enough and you can find a good one, you're going to find that you're going to make a lot of progress much quicker, and it's going to be way more beneficial for you than some other forms of therapy. We need to heal ourselves, and we need to rebuild those neural pathways with our system and our parts to get there. I definitely recommend finding a therapist and getting your help that you deserve, and that is necessary for you to get better. It takes baby steps. It's a long process, and if you work really hard at it and you take it seriously, you can get there, and you can find yourself feeling better and feeling happier about your life and your situation. It's a necessity. It's got to be done. Yeah. I would like to say that in the next 30 days, I'm planning on putting out multiple short recorded sessions where I'm going to be discussing my trauma, and I'm going to do some processing online, and I'm going to record them and put them in my podcast lineup. The only thing is that in order to be able to access them, you will need to subscribe to Apple Podcasts. They'll probably be about, I would think, on average 15 minutes in length, but I'll probably put out multiple at a time. I'm hoping to get a large number of sessions out there, and there'll be different things. It won't always be the same, but it will all be towards, doing processing and working with my system and healing. So yeah, if you want to have access to them and you want to it's going to be great examples and a lot of practical good use for someone who's just starting out or maybe is looking to get a better understanding of how it works, how trauma develops, and how to take care of yourself. Then I would recommend subscribing to that podcast and getting access to the bonus material, because that's the only way you're going to be able to hear it. They won't be available to the public like my regular episodes. So I definitely recommend, if you think they're going to be beneficial to you, subscribe to my show and get access to the sessions and my short clips that I'm going to have out real soon. Okay, that's it for today's episode. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can either do it on Twitter, which is at ADHD and CPTSD. You can email me. It's livingwithadhd and CPTSD @gmail.com. There's my website, livingwithadhd and CPTSD.ca. You can also go to ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/livingwithadhd and CPTSD. You can donate and tip my show if you really think this are very beneficial for you and are potentially life-changing. I would really appreciate the help that you get from you guys, as I do need to pay for my programs that I use to make this show. All right. Have a great weekend, and I shall talk to you later. Bye, everyone.